So, what is Tatsuya's scenario? Well, simply put, it was a few extra sections of gameplay added to the PSP remake of Eternal Punishment. And as you might expect, they were mostly centered around former protagonist Tatsuya and what he was up to while Maya and pals were busy trying to track him down. Unfortunately for us, though, the PSP remake was never released outside of Japan, and with no English translation of the game, I don't really have the means of actually playing the scenario myself. However, what I do have is a massive collection of screenshots of the game, as well as a few bits of gameplay I was able to scrounge off the internet, and a brilliantly done fan translation of the game script, which I will link in the description if you'd rather just go and read about the scenario yourself. Honestly, it's really good, you probably should do that. Anyways, unfortunately this video is going to be a bit more slideshowy, if that's a word, than my usual videos. But if you are a fan of Persona 2, I do think it's worth your time to experience the scenario at least once, as it's quite an interesting tale. Speaking of, obviously if you haven't played Persona 2 Eternal Punishment, then this video is probably not going to make a whole lot of sense. I do have a summary of my own that you can check out before watching this video if you want, but honestly, if you're a fan of Persona and you haven't played either of the Persona 2s, you really should. They're worth at least one playthrough. In any case, with that out of the way, let's begin. Persona 2 Eternal Punishment, Tatsuya's scenario. So Tatsuya's scenario is split up into 3 episodes that take place over different sections of Eternal Punishment's storyline. The first, unsurprisingly enough, takes place right around the start of Eternal Punishment, and opens on a woman we've never seen before entering a club that we have seen before. After a look around the place, she makes her way over to the only familiar face in the place, Anna. Anna, if you'll remember, had a pretty significant role in An Innocent Sin as one of Joker's goons, Lady Scorpio, but in Eternal Punishment, her role was downsized into being just a suspect in the first murder case. Well, this lady appears to be here to talk with Anna about said murder case, as she begins to question her. She introduces herself as Shiori Miyashiro, a member of the police department's juvenile division, and asks a whole lot of questions relating to the Joker of Anna. Who is he? What does he look like? Has she ever spoken with him? Things like that. Anna seems to know something of the Joker rumor, which, if you'll remember in Eternal Punishment, was calling your own number, whereupon the Joker would answer and kill anyone you asked him to, but at this point is entirely fed up with answering questions to cops, and tries to ignore Shiori. So Shiori reveals a scrap of paper she has, with the words, "You're next," scribbled onto it. What's more, the note appears to be addressed directly to Shiori herself. Anna is taken aback by the note, realizing what the note actually means, but eventually shrugs it off, calling it a fake. And it's here that we get a bit of a look into Shiori's mind, as she gives us a bit of a monologue. Basically, she realizes that she's been acting a little bit rude with Anna. I mean, from Anna's perspective, it probably looks like Shiori is just trying to pin the blame on her and trying to make her confess to calling the Joker. But in actuality, she's here at the club for an entirely different reason, and was just trying to get any information she could on who the Joker was and how he operated. In fact, she's almost certain that Anna is innocent in the charges laid against her. So instead of pestering her further, Shiori apologizes to her and moves on to talk with the bartender instead, so she can set about what her actual plan for the evening is. After flashing her badge and intimidating the bartender over the lack of regulation employed in this club, there's actually a pretty long dialogue about nightclub law, weirdly enough, Shiori sets up 3 conditions. First, she rents a room for the night, a room which she can lock from the inside with only one entrance. Secondly, she gives her card to the bartender and tells him to call her cell should anyone approach looking to enter her room. Thirdly, should morning come and nobody leaves the room, including herself, that the bartender should call one Sergeant Suo, and only Sergeant Suo, and fill him in on what she just did. At this point, it becomes pretty clear on what her plan is. Basically, she called the Joker and put a hit out on herself. Placing herself in a crowded venue would mean that multiple witnesses would see him coming to kill her, and locking herself in an isolated room within that crowd would mean that only one person, the one who entered that room, would be capable of committing the crime. Even if she dies as a result of this experiment, the identity of the Joker would at least finally be made public. Anna, having eavesdropped on Shiori's conversation with the bartender, rushes over to her, now realizing that she's just not another cop looking for a confession, and asks if she's really serious about all this. Like, what kind of person would put their own life on the line to do something like this? Shiori simply smiles to Anna and says that she couldn't have made anyone else do it, she had to do it herself. She tells Anna that it's late and someone as young as her really shouldn't be in a place like this at night, for heading off to her room. As she leaves, once more, she reaches down for her cell phone and calls her own number. Just like she did the first time, someone definitely answers but doesn't say anything. So, she simply says, Shiori Miyashiro is at Club Zodiac. It's now that we cut away from Shiori and back to Tatsuya, who's hunkered down in a shed of some kind. In his mind, he runs through the events that led up to him being here. The promise he made with his friends to forget his ever-changing past, his inability to forget the bonds he made in his previous world, and his arrival in this new world. When he had come to on this side, his thoughts were a mess. He stumbled around confused until suddenly he bumped into her. That smile. How could he forget that persistent, relentless smile? Maya apologizes to Tatsuya. Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't looking where I was going. I'm such a klutz. Before looking up and realizing, have we met somewhere before? Tatsuya, unsure what to say, instead chooses to bolt from the scene without saying anything to Maya, until he eventually finds a dark corner where he can hide it. The weight of his actions begins to sink in. The world he tried to create had become a reality, and that smile once seemingly lost to the ages was once again back stronger than ever. And yet, his existence should not be. He now knows everything. He knows he's not of this world. He knows that this isn't his body, instead he's inhabiting the Tatsuya of this side. He knows that he shouldn't remember everything that he does. And he wishes desperately that he could just drift deep within the reaches of this Tatsuya's subconscious and be forgotten from the world. But he can't. A slithering, hate-filled yet familiar voice creeps its way into Tatsuya's head. Tatsuya's existence is a poison on this world, a cancer, slowly eating away at the very fabric of reality. There's nothing he can do to escape it. The more he hides, the faster this world will be brought to its eventual ruin. Suddenly, Tatsuya's brooding is abruptly cut off by the sound of a cell phone. This side, Tatsuya's cell phone. It's from Anna, of all people. Apparently the Tatsuya of this side is pretty close with her. Our boy Tatsuya tries to ignore the call. After all, he's not the Tatsuya she knows, but Anna doesn't really seem to be giving up trying to contact him, and eventually Tatsuya does pick up the phone. Anna's more relieved that he's alright than upset that he didn't respond. It looks like the Tatsuya of this side was supposed to meet with her at Club Zodiac tonight, but Anna says he probably shouldn't bother coming. Some strange policewoman she'd never met before was up to something. She was talking about the Joker rumor, and she even mentioned Tatsuya's brother. Tatsuya is taken aback both at the mention of his brother, but also the name Joker. Jun was the Joker on his side, but his memories had safely been forgotten and the events of 10 years ago altered. He should have no reason to be the Joker this time around, so that means that someone else must have taken up the mantle. Which almost certainly means more foul play from him. Tatsuya demands that Anna get out of that club immediately, remembering her previous involvement with the Joker, before setting out on the Tatsuya of this side's motorcycle. As he drives, he makes a vow. He may be pulling the strings once more. He may be up to his old tricks, aiming to destroy everything that Tatsuya and his friends had fought to protect. But this time, Tatsuya will stop him. Whatever twisted scheme he comes up with, no matter what Tatsuya has to do, no matter how much of himself he has to sacrifice, Tatsuya will put a stop to the crawling chaos. And so Tatsuya arrives at Club Zodiac and immediately intimidates the bartender into giving him all the info on the police officer and where she is, as well as a key to her room. He doesn't know what this girl plans to do by calling the Joker on herself, but he knows he has to try and save her. As he makes his way to her room, Anna appears and tries to stop him. She asks him why he's been acting so strange. This isn't anything like the Tatsuya she knows. Is he really the Tatsuya she knows? Tatsuya is stunned for a moment, unsure how to respond to her. Just a quick side note here, there's a little moment here where Tatsuya thinks to himself about what he should say to Anna to throw her suspicion off, and he remembers that the Tatsuya of this side used to use impressions every once in a while to try to cheer up Anna whenever she looked down. And honestly, just the idea that Tatsuya would do something like make construction equipment noises to cheer up his friends is probably the most adorable thing I've ever heard about the guy. Anyways, our boy Tatsuya decides that he can't get Anna involved and instead just tries to brush her off, claiming, of course he's Tatsuya, who else could he be? Obviously, that's not enough to convince her, so Anna just tries to figure out what the heck is going on. Why is Tatsuya going after that woman, and who is she anyway? What does she want with the Joker? Tatsuya stares at her for a moment before turning his back on her and once again not explaining anything. He tells her to go home, and under his breath he mutters that he will protect her and all of his friends, and keep fighting until he's atoned for the sins of his past. And once again we cut back to Shiori, now waiting in her empty room for what's seemingly been quite a while. As we watch her, she begins to doze off a little bit, and a vision starts to appear before her. It's a dream, and one that apparently she's had before. One of a strange temple and a weird, ethereal man in a butterfly mask. The man asks her name, and Shiori responds that she won't tell him until she hears his. And it's here that we get a bit of an explanation of why Shiori is going to such lengths to seek out the Joker. You see, she's been having these dreams of this ethereal place ever since one specific incident in her past. The death of her younger brother. But whenever the man in the butterfly mask had asked for her name, she had refused and instead demanded an explanation from him. Who had done this to her brother? Her mind flashes through bits and pieces of her past. Of the death of her brother and the crazed maniac that she saw kill him. Of her joining the police force to try to find a way to track down the one who had done it. And a rumor on the identity of the Joker. Being a man named Tatsuya Sudo, son of a prominent minister named Tatsuzo. Her thoughts are cut short, however, as the doorknob to her room suddenly begins to turn. Shiori jumps to her feet at the noise. She crouches beside the doorway and dims the lights, getting ready to ambush. The door opens, and Shiori immediately puts her gun to the figure's head. He's carrying a sword, but drops it on Shiori's command, before sinking to his knees with his hands behind his head. Here he is, that bastard the Joker, finally caught with her trap. Finally, he can pay for all the crimes he committed. Finally, he can pay for the death of her younger brother. But as she thinks this, a couple other stray thoughts begin to fly into Shiori's head. She knows the legal system well, and she knows that she doesn't have enough proof to convict him of being the hitman Joker. Sure, she could back him for breaking into her room here and carrying a weapon like a sword, but that's nothing compared to the horrible crimes he's committed. What's more, in the past, this deranged maniac was once convicted of being a serial murderer. But, thanks to his deranged nature and influential father, he managed to walk away scot-free. Once again, even if she captures him now, there's a very high probability that he would receive no punishment for anything he's done. How is it fair that a man gets to have his sentence diminished or revoked because he wasn't in a normal state of mind? How can someone who's lost everything to something like that accept such a worthless verdict? You've seen enough movies, you already know what's about to happen, right? Of course, as Shiori cocks her gun and turns on the lights to see who it is that she has at gunpoint, it turns out to be Tatsuya, not, Tatsuya. I mean, it turns out to be Suo, not Sudo. It's her hero, it's not the Joker, okay? Anyway, Shiori realizes that this isn't the man she's looking for, but she's still suspicious of the boy before her. He's clearly still in high school, so what the heck is he doing here, and why the heck does he have a sword? Well, for starters, Tatsuya points out that the sword is wooden, not a real one. And when she checks his ID, she does recognize that he probably is the brother of Katsuya, and the son of former Detective Suo, who she apparently knows. She asks what the heck he's doing here, and Tatsuya responds that he's here to save her, that she needs to leave as her gun is going to have no effect once the Joker arrives. And just as he's finishing that, Tatsuya suddenly whips around, shoving Shiori to the side and pushing her gun into an unusable position. Shiori is taken aback, partly at how quickly she was overpowered, but more so by how expertly a high school student was able to disarm her. It's then she looks to her side about a foot away and notices a massive knife embedded all the way to the hilt in the wall, exactly where her head was not 10 seconds ago. Tatsuya, still pushing Shiori to the side, shouts out, "How long have you been there?" "From the start, dumbass!" a cackling voice responds. Tatsuya releases his grip on Shiori, and she quickly whirls around to train her gun on the new voice. And sure enough, there he is. The man himself, Tatsuya Sudo. Tatsuya and Sudo have a bit of a back and forth at this point. It seems like he filled in this Sudo on what happened on the other side and who exactly this Tatsuya is. Tatsuya himself isn't too surprised to find out that Sudo is the one who became the Joker this time around. After all, he was one of his goons in the original timeline. In the meantime, Shiori is desperately trying to figure out what the heck is going on. These two seem to know each other, but how? Why is this high school kid so damn confident, so capable? As those thoughts are going on, Tatsuya tries to reason with Sudo, tries to tell him not to listen to him, that it's not too late to start over. However, Shiori is having none of that and screams that this man can't just start over. He's been killing for years and needs to pay for his crimes. Tatsuya is taken aback by her sudden outburst, and Sudo turns to her, a realization dawning on him.
"Of course!" he exclaimed. "This broad, her little brother was your stand-in, your replacement because you brats changed your fate 10 years ago. That boy got axed in your stead."
And Sudo descends into another fit of laughter, exclaiming how wonderful the voices are. Shiori and Tatsuya are both stunned. Tatsuya seems to have a sudden realization sink in, and Shiori still isn't entirely sure what is going on, but is extremely surprised at the mention of her brother's death, and what being his stand-in means. Sudo's maniacal laughter is cut short, however, when a phone rings, and he answers it. After a few seconds on the line, he puts it back down and once again returns to laughing. He informs the group in front of him that he's just got another order. Another target. One Maya Amino. Immediately, Tatsuya summons her persona, and Sudo responds in kind. The two shadows clash into one another as Shiori looks on in its stunned silence. What follows is a crazed fight. Tatsuya lays into Sudo with everything he's got, while Sudo simply laughs, taunting him, claiming that it's all his fault that she died, that he too will eventually give in to the voices. Eventually, Tatsuya does defeat Sudo, but before he can lay the finishing blow, he seems to fade into the darkness behind him. Presumably off to go tell Maya to
Persona! Persona! Call out your persona!
Shiori and Tatsuya stand for a moment in silence. She thinks to herself that he kinda looks like one of those movie characters who stand alone in the rain, mourning the loss of a loved one. Eventually, though, Tatsuya breaks the silence and turns to her, and he asks about her brother and how he died. Shiori explains that apparently one night 10 years ago at a familiar-looking shrine, a man named Sudo killed him in a most gruesome way. Tatsuya seems to fall into an even deeper well of despair at the news. The very same day, that same day, it can't just be a coincidence. Is it really all true? Shiori is taken aback. Nobody had ever believed her before, that her brother had been murdered by this man Sudo. Nobody, that is, but Detective Suo, Tatsuya's father. As she stares at Tatsuya, she sees a darkness hovering over him. He looks like he's standing next to a bottomless pit of despair, and all it would take is one tiny push to send him hurtling deep into the darkest depths of it, with no way of recovering. Shiori's at a loss. She's confused and still has no idea what's going on. But at her core, she realizes who she is. She became a police officer in the juvenile division, partially to get revenge for her brother, but also because she wanted to help children, young people who were struggling to find their place in the world. She wanted to help create a society that they could move into and be happy in. And seeing this boy in this absolute state of sadness before her makes her realize that she wants to, no, that she needs to help him. She doesn't know what she can do to help. She doesn't know even if she can help. But whatever it is he went through, she wants to help shoulder at least some of that burden. So she tells him about her hunt for Sudo, how his father Tetsuzo had covered up his son's misdeeds, and how Tatsuya's father had given up everything he had to help protect her and his sons from Tetsuzo. How she had made it her mission to hunt down Sudo and bring him to justice, and how she had come here this very evening. Tatsuya apologizes to her, the only thing he can do at this point, and claims to be the reason for her brother's death. Shiori doesn't respond to this, but instead gestures to him to follow her as they leave the club. She ends up bringing him home with her to her apartment, and gives him a room where he can stay and be safe and rest at the very least whenever he needs it. Funnily enough, though, this means that Tatsuya ends up staying in the same complex as Maya and Ulala. And it's now that we jump to episode 2 of Tatsuya's scenario, and once again begin to follow around Shiori. She's meeting with a security guard who turns out to be Tatsuya's father, and is currently in the process of explaining everything to him that has just happened. Apparently, a fair bit of time has passed since Club Zodiac, and in that intervening period, Tatsuya explained everything to Shiori. Unbeknownst to him, however, she had apparently recorded that conversation and was now showing it to his father. The reasons for her doing this are twofold. First off, to tell the father that his son Tatsuya is okay. Well as someone in his position can be. At least he's getting regular meals and a bed every day. Secondly, it's to tell him about the weird shit that's going on in town. The Joker, all the stuff surrounding Tatsuya, and the ever-present oddity of Persona 2, the fact that rumors are coming true. To prove her point, she pulls a gun from her jacket pocket, which she claims she purchased at a local bar. Tatsuya's father is taken aback by the flood of information, but seems to trust Shiori a great deal. So he agrees with her and decides to call off any sort of investigation he was doing into looking for his missing son. In any event, he's currently on the job and has to get back to it, so he says his goodbyes to Shiori, and once again we get a bit of an inner monologue from her. Basically, she runs through a few things in her head about how well the conversation went, but also a few things she didn't tell former Detective Sudo. About a deal she'd made with Tatsuya. In exchange for the room and board she was giving him, she would also give him info on the Joker case directly from the police. In return, what she asked was that Tatsuya kill Sudo for her, vengeance for her younger brother. She's torn a little bit at the inside of the conflicting thoughts of wanting to help shoulder Tatsuya's burden while at the same time knowing that he's the only one capable of helping her and getting her vengeance against Sudo. As she thinks to herself, in the background you hear some children shouting. They seem to be talking about some sort of blimp or something. Okay, so here's where a bit of a problem arises. This point of the scenario takes place alongside a certain part of Eternal Punishment, when you team up with both Eriko and Kei Nanjo. Unfortunately for me though, Tatsuya's scenario assumes that you took Kei Nanjo's route, not Eriko's, in your main playthrough. But when I did my summary of Eternal Punishment, I took Eriko's route, because, well, that video was long enough already, so I went with a shorter option. So, for the few of you who are watching this based off the information I provided in that video, I'm going to do a quick summary about Kei Nanjo's route first before we continue. If you already know about this route, or don't really care to hear about it, you can just skip to this timestamp here, and I'll continue on with Tatsuya's scenario itself. Anyways, if you remember, Maya and pals had just talked with the secretive Sneak, and either spread a rumor about a boy or a girl. This time around, you went for the boy, and this time you get Nanjo, or Nate, in your party. If you remember, in the other scenario, you followed Eriko, or Ellen, around to investigate the mysterious Wanglong fortune-telling at a TV studio, where you found out how the New World Order were creating and collecting Jokers. Well, this time instead, you follow Nanjo to an underground lab where you find out why the New World Order is collecting Jokers. Unfortunately, the secret lab is highly secure, so your group is forced to sneak in through a long series of sewers. It is also apparently being run by a man named Kandori, who Nanjo knows personally. The reason for this is that Kandori was the primary antagonist from Persona 1. Now, that fact is not particularly important to know right now. All you really need to know is that at the end of Persona 1, Kandori was very much dead, so him working for the NWO is a little odd. Anyways, after collecting a bit of information, disabling a whole bunch of guards, and a quick run-in with Ekichi, good to see you buddy, you eventually make it to a center room which contains a massive machine. This machine, as it turns out, literally drags the dark energy known as Kegare out of the Jokers that they're collecting. But, as you find out this tasty tidbit of information, who should appear but Kandori himself, with a gun trained on Ekichi. A bunch of armed guards also jump out of a bunch of other doors and have your party surrounded. Looks like your party aren't going to be able to escape from this one too easily when who should appear but our boy Tatsuya. After quickly punting Ekichi down the hallway, he blocks the bullet from Kandori and points his sword at him. The distraction is enough that your group is able to escape and make it back to Nanjo's apartment. And there's a few other extra things that happen here or there throughout the story, but the only important thing you need to know right now is that there's a secret lab for the NWO that's been collecting Jokers and it's run by Kandori. Alright, well with that explanation done, we can now return back to Tatsuya's scenario, and we once again go back to our boy, Tatsuya. He's just returned to Shiori's apartment, and he's completely drenched. I mean, he did just drag himself out of the ocean after crashing a massive blimp into it, after all. He takes a shower and mulls over the past events that happened today. Sudo is finally dead. Just like Tatsuya suspected, he was going to try to wrap Jun up in his schemes, try to pass the mantle of Joker over to him. But with his prior knowledge of the other world's events, he was able to put a stop to that without too much trouble, until she appeared. Tatsuya had thought that Maya would finally be safe, that if he gave her that emblem to protect her from the Joker, she would not get involved in the mess that he was currently entangled in. But unfortunately, it seems like the more he tries to push her away, the more intrigued she gets in that mysterious deja vu boy that she keeps seeing. Ugh, and he still needs to worry about Jun and his others at the same time. It's becoming very apparent that he hasn't even begun to make a dent in stopping his plans. As Tatsuya exits the shower, he starts to think about the events of 10 years ago on the other side, when he and Maya were nearly killed by that psychotic Sudo in a fiery blaze. But because of their wish with Philemon, the past had been altered, and instead Shiori's younger brother had been the one at the shrine. This clearly isn't just a random occurrence. It must be a message from him about what happens when you mess with the past. Suddenly, though, Tatsuya's thoughts are interrupted by a phone call. Tatsuya obviously doesn't answer because, well, it's Shiori's phone, but eventually the machine answers, whereupon a strange voice begins to whisper into the room. It says, "I know who you called. Contact Sergeant Suo as soon as possible." Tatsuya is shocked at the mention of his brother. It was obviously a call for Shiori, but why would someone be telling her to contact Tatsuya? A thought suddenly dawns on him. A horrible one. He rushes over to the TV and starts flipping through the channels until he comes upon a shady-looking fortune teller who's touting a familiar message. She claims that those who use the Joker curse will themselves become Jokers. Tatsuya steps back in shock, the reality setting in for him. This is a rumor, a big rumor, one that will cause people who called the Joker to become Jokers. That voice that called, it must have known. It knew that Shiori called the Joker on herself, and that she may also become one. Tatsuya quickly rushes for the phone and desperately tries to contact Shiori. No luck. It doesn't even go to voicemail. With a heavy heart, Tatsuya once again grabs his sword and heads out. He needs to find her before she kills someone. And we cut forward to 2 days later, where we find Tatsuya arriving at the underground lab. He finds that all the security has been disabled and the guards incapacitated, and there appears to be a large number of coins littering the floor. Yep, looks like Maya's group is here on the same path as well. Tatsuya isn't too pleased at the news though. Now he has to protect both Maya and pals, as well as find a way to rescue Shiori, as well as figure out who the hell these people are and why they're collecting Jokers. Anyways, he begins to make his way through the lab when who should he bump into but Ekichi. He's understandably shocked to see his old friend, but he plays it cool. He can't let Ekichi know that they were close in another life. He drills Ekichi for a bit of information, and Ekichi explains what he knows, that this place is conducting some sort of experiments on people, and that he was helped by Maya and pals. But aside from that, he doesn't know too much. There are also a bunch of test subjects that have been waiting around with Ekichi for Maya and pals to come back to help them escape, but unfortunately it doesn't seem that Shiori is with them. Anyways, Tatsuya decides that he needs to help Ekichi first and provides a bit of guard duty to him and the other patients as they escape the lab to a trailer that Nanjo had set up to help rescue the people inside. After he safely evacuates them all, he turns to leave Ekichi and go back into the lab to search for Maya and Shiori, but before he does, Ekichi stops him and asks, "How does Tatsuya know his name anyway?" Tatsuya pauses for a moment, then smiles and shrugs. Who doesn't know the undie boss of Kusai? Undie boss? What sort of a nickname is that, Ekichi wonders, though it does have a bit of a familiar ring to it. Tatsuya, realizing his mistake, quickly runs away before he can say any more. What follows is a bit of stealth and quite a bit of gratuitous violence as Tatsuya goes deeper into the facility. He forces a bunch of guards to get him caught up to speed on who the NWO and Tatsuzo are, until eventually he manages to come to the part of the lab where Shiori is being held. Unfortunately, however, it looks like she was used for a rather special experiment, as she has transformed fully into a hideous demon. There are 2 men present, studying her, monitoring the effects of her transformation and her appearance and behaviors. She's shackled to the side of the room, apparently unconscious. The sight of her hideous visage flies Tatsuya into a rage. We cut to black, then return to find one man lying on the floor, with the other pinned up against the wall by Tatsuya with his sword at his throat. Tatsuya demands that the man turn her back, change her back to what she was. The man, barely able to breathe thanks to Tatsuya's arm pressed against his throat, croaks out that only one man knows how to change her back, a man named Kandori. Tatsuya glares at the man he has pinned down as he gasps desperately for any air he can. A dark and sinister voice seems to twist its way into Tatsuya's mind, a deep and endless hatred welling up within him. These two men, the guards on the way here, that Kandori, they all did this to her. They all deserve what's coming to them. They all deserve to die. But as Tatsuya has these thoughts, very quietly, the other man, who appeared to be unconscious, sneaks up to a computer and releases the shackles that were holding Shiori in place. Tatsuya whirls around as the demon Shiori slumps to the floor, then stands up and turns towards him. The demon Shiori, now known as Wendigo, advances on Tatsuya, fully transformed from the human she once was. The man who released her cackles triumphantly, claiming that Tatsuya is going to get what he deserves. The man who Tatsuya had pinned up against the wall simply coughs, trying to catch his breath. Tatsuya is forced to turn his attention on Shiori, but it's not something that he can just win through brute force. While she may be a demon seeking his life, while she may be not in her right mind, she's still Shiori, the woman who took him in and tried to help him after hearing his secret. As the battle ensues, eventually, the man that Tatsuya had nearly killed calls out to him. Tatsuya turns to him and sees the man gesturing towards a pipe, which is full of some sort of anesthesia the scientists were using to keep Demon Shiori sedated. Quickly, Tatsuya slices the pipe open and blasts the monster with enough gas to sedate a bull elephant. The monster squirms, but eventually topples over, unconscious. As she slumps to the floor, incapacitated, Tatsuya stands up and collects himself, the darkness that overtook him slowly retreating. The man that Tatsuya had almost killed nervously stands to the side, while the other scientist who had released Shiori seems to have died in the intervening fight. Funnily enough, though, if that scientist hadn't tried to kill Tatsuya, Tatsuya may very well have gone all the way with the other guy, the one who had saved him. Tatsuya apologizes to the scientist for what he did, but the man is surprisingly understanding. He mentions that, honestly, if he were in the same position and saw what he did, he might have done the same thing. In any event, he points down a hallway, claiming that Kandori, the only one capable of potentially saving Shiori, and the machine he's using to collect all the Kegare, is down that way. Tatsuya thanks him and makes his way off to meet this man in black. As you can probably guess, we now cut to the scene from the original game of Tatsuya saving Ekichi and the rest from Kandori. But this time, instead we stay focused on Tatsuya and what he and Kandori talk about. It's plainly apparent that Kandori knows exactly who Tatsuya really is, and probably even who he is. A drawn-out battle ensues, which Tatsuya does win, but it's pretty clear that Kandori isn't really taking the fight too seriously. The two have a bit of a small talk, and Tatsuya demands that he explain how to turn Shiori back to normal, but Kandori simply laughs at this. With a quick jab, he manages to remove all the air from Tatsuya's lungs and moves to leave. Tatsuya tries to stop him from moving, but doubles over from the pain and lack of oxygen reaching his lungs. But as Kandori makes to leave, he stops, turns around, and says one thing to Tatsuya. If you wish to save Shiori Miyashiro, seek out a suitable place for her. Assuming, of course, that you suppose you're capable of attaining all the contradictory values at once, of course. And with that said, he walks off, laughing as he does. Tatsuya winces at the sight of him making his escape, but decides that it's not worth following him, and turns to go back to where the unconscious Shiori is. As he enters the room, he bumps into Ekichi, who is waiting to thank him for once again saving him. Tatsuya makes Ekichi swear that he won't tell Maya about him, that he'll pretend like they've only just met, that, he and Ekichi are complete strangers. Ekichi is very confused by the request, but agrees, seeing that Tatsuya has his own reasons for asking it. He also says that, well, if Tatsuya wants, he's always welcome to come and crash at his pad. After he's done band practice. There, they could talk about what's on his mind, if he feels up to it. With that said, Ekichi leaves. Oh, Ekichi. Too good for this world. After that, Tatsuya turns to the still unconscious demonic form of Shiori. She's changed in shape quite a bit, but she's still light enough to carry. As he carries her out of the building, he thinks about what that suitable place could be that Kendori mentioned. What could be suitable for something as otherworldly as this? And well, there is one person that he has met that might have a bit of an inkling about demons and that sort of thing. That weird, long-nosed man in the blue room. So we get to have a nice little chat with Igor, who's surprisingly open for once in his life. He explains that there's not a whole lot he can do for Shiori. While he could remove the demon from her body pretty easily, her actual consciousness has apparently been severed from her body entirely, and calling it back is something beyond his abilities. Apparently, what has happened to her consciousness is it has been spread across the realm of demons, known as Kadath Mandala. Igor explains that the only way to get her back into her own body would be to head to this Kadath and collect the shattered pieces of her psyche. Everything about her perception, her knowledge, her memories, and even the darkest parts of her subconscious that she pretends doesn't exist. So Tatsuya asks, how does one enter this Kadath place? And there are a couple of ways, but none of them are particularly easy. I mean, Philemon could have easily let him in before, but with the change in the world and the wish being made, his powers have grown very weak. Right now, the only one capable of really just sending them in would be the Crawling Chaos himself. But Tatsuya himself is a Persona user, and technically speaking, all Persona users have the means of entering Kadath. But it is an exceedingly long process of understanding and self-reflection, and by the time Tatsuya mastered it, Shiori's consciousness would have faded from existence. Nope, the only option to Tatsuya is to talk to a human who possesses the key that physically opens the gate to Kadath, a strange being known as Swami Chandraputra. However, this being is a bit of a eccentric, and it'll take some time before Igor can summon him. So for now, all Tatsuya can do is return to his mission, try to protect Maya and pals, and wait before he can set out to save Shiori. And it's here that we arrive at the final episode of Tatsuya's scenario. A fair amount of time has passed, and this one takes place after the events at Xibalba and Eternal Punishment. At this point, Tatsuya has explained everything to the whole gang, and is now traveling with Ulala, Baofu, Katsuya, and Maya. Anyways, we regroup with all of them right after Tatsuya has finished explaining everything to them about Shiori and his mission to rescue her. The reason for him doing this is Igor has finally managed to contact Chandraputra, and Tatsuya finally has a means to enter Kadath. The being greets your party. He seems ancient, but very wise. Tatsuya, being Tatsuya, tries to say that he needs to head off alone to go and save Shiori, but of course the rest of your party brush him off. Come on, man. Of course we're all going together, we can't just leave this to you. Tatsuya eventually relents, and your group all asks Chandraputra to let you through. He agrees, and with that, the Swami turns the key, opening the gateway to Kadath. You find yourself in a mystical realm, one not unlike the realm of Philemon and him. Mystical energy and light whirls around your party, but that's not the most prominent thing about this place. Nope, the real thing that draws the eyes of your party is in the center of the room, where stands a cat. It greets you in a manner befitting a drill sergeant, oddly enough, and Ulala jumps back in shock at it suddenly speaking, before realizing a talking cat really isn't all that strange compared to some of the shit they've seen on their journey. Anyways, the cat claims to be Lieutenant General Zula, at ease, soldiers, of the Ulthar Cat Army, before saluting your party. And there's a bit of a funny scene where Katsuya instinctively salutes back before realizing that it's kind of embarrassing to salute a cat. But in any case, the cat claims that he's here to guide you through Kadath, since you're so unfamiliar with it. So Tatsuya asks, how are we supposed to rescue Shiori's subconscious? The cat responds that it's going to take time. This is going to be a slow process, and a lot needs to be done to recreate her mind. But it all needs to be done right. You see, scattered throughout the lands of Kadath are these shards that make up her mind. Each shard represents a different aspect of her, things like perseverance, emotion, wisdom, ethics, reason, things like that. Each piece makes up a part of her, and each piece is just as vitally important as the last. She'll never be complete unless you collect all of them. To make matters worse, it appears that each shard is being guarded by some demon, some part of humanity's subconscious. But your group knew the risks coming into this, and can only really push forward at this point in their quest to rescue Shiori. The cat, seeing your resolve, nods in approval, then motions upward with its tail, at the first obstacle they will have to overcome. While your group can't really make anything out above them, suddenly a presence is felt above you. A weight unlike anything your group has encountered before. Zula explains that this is Atawel, sorry if I pronounced that really badly, an avatar that represents the very boundary of the conscious and subconscious worlds. It turns out that Chandraputra's key and the gate you came through is kind of a big no-no in this world, as you're basically illegally entering, and this entity that's bearing down on you tends to be pretty angry at people who enter through it. The cat says that he's pretty sure most of us will die, but he'll pray for you before vanishing. Unsurprisingly, a boss fight starts, though it's not as difficult as the game makes it appear. Your group managed to repel but not defeat Umar, and Zula promptly returns, congratulating you and offering you your prize, the first piece of Shiori's psyche. This piece contains her knowledge, all the things she learned over the course of her life. It's the first of many to come, but your journey is off to a good start, so everyone, including Zula, head off into the vast labyrinth that is Kadath to locate the other shards. First up, you come across a demon known as Virochana, who is an Ashura in the Hindu religion. He simply asks your group a question. Dost thou affirm or deny that thou within thyself is thou? A odd question to be sure, and everyone mulls over what the answer could be. Ulala is unsure on what the question really means, Tatsuya gets really philosophical about it, Tatsuya answers sincerely, and Baofu responds by calling the question a load of shit. Oh, some people never change. Of course, the decision is left up to Maya, who responds that there is a self called me. Virochana seems pleased with her response and presents her with a shard. The shard of reason this time. Next up, we come across a being known as Sakya, aka Sakyamuni, aka Buddha. Like the last one, he too asks a question. What is your self as far as you are concerned? Once again, Maya is tasked with answering, and this time around answers that her self is that which brings about doubt and suffering. The entity seems pleased with the answer, claiming that the self is the ultimate harbinger of suffering within the world. All things inherently lack an identity, and forcing a self upon it is what brings about suffering, and gives her the shard, this time the shard of perseverance. The third room on your journey contains a demon known as Azazel, who Zula informs you is a fallen angel of Hebrew legend, one whose entire existence is devoted to fornicating illicitly with human women. Huh. I mean, they are demons. Tatsuya demands that he hand over the shard of Shiori's psyche, and the demon responds, sure, just give me the woman that I want, okay? Everyone pauses before turning to look at Ulala. Oh no, they actually consider it. But, possibly worse than that, the demon basically slut-shames Ulala that he'd rather go for a purer maiden like Maya. Oh no, Persona, why? Anyways, at the mention of Maya, Katsuya and Tatsuya immediately pull out their weapons, while Ulala shouts, what the hell, guys, really? And you battle with the beast. And it's not long before it's defeated, and another shard sits on the floor before you. This time, her drive. Her desires, if you will. As the shard falls to the floor, Ulala wonders aloud if Shiori really would want these back. Desires and the lack of being able to reach them are ultimately what bring about the most suffering within people. But your group have a little bit of a talk about the importance of desire and how it's a necessary part of being human. So, Ulala decides to take a peek at what Shiori's desires actually are, and gestures that Maya do the same. Oh, come on, Ulala, that's a breach of privacy. We shouldn't be doing this. But then again, Maya is a journalist at a teen magazine, and this could provide some pretty hot gossip. Oh, a little peek couldn't hurt, right? So the two of them take a peek inside the shard, whereupon they find that, let's just say no one's safe from Tatsuya's bad boy charm. So the two decide to keep the info to themselves and move on to the next room. Next up, you find Izanami, Hey, she was the final boss of Persona 4. She asks why she's wearing a mask. Tatsuya takes this moment to explain the myth of Izanami and Izanagi creating the country of Japan. Basically, she died in childbirth and Izanagi went to the underworld to try and bring her back. But when she asked him not to look at her face, for it was rotten and withered, he did anyways and immediately ran away at the sight of it. So she vowed that every single day she would kill 1,000 of the humans that dwelled in his realm, but Izanagi responded by saying he would ensure 1,500 people would be born each day. Neat story, you should look it up sometime. Anyways, the actual answer once again falls on Maya's shoulders, and she responds that Izanami simply wears a mask to hide her rotted face from him. Izanami sadly nods in agreement before disappearing, leaving behind the next shard, the Shard of Emotion. Next up, you come across an entity known as Angra Mainyu, who's kinda like the Zoroastrian version of the devil. He asks if such a thing as unyielding good exists. A difficult question indeed, and one that the rest of your party seems to think is not really a thing. I mean, not truly. But it's not the rest of your party that gets to answer the question, it's Maya, goddammit. Think positive! Yes, absolute good does exist. Angra seems intrigued. He claims that humanity has fought countless battles, devoured, destroyed, and in the end called it good. But nature in itself is evil, and the motivation to survive is selfish. How can true good exist? Tatsuya is the one who steps in at this point, and makes a good argument. Basically, Angra Mainyu is the devil. Pure evil. And if he's evil, then good must exist. If no good does exist, then nothing matters and nothing is evil. And at this response, Angra Mainyu smiles. Precisely. Either good and evil exist, or neither does. And because he exists, therefore, good does too. With that, he vanishes, and the Shard of Ethics is left for your party. In the next room, Zula calls for your group to stand at attention. Before stands you the great Nodens, avatar of Philemon, an ancient healing being of Celtic mythology. The entity holds yet another shard of Shiori's consciousness and tells your party of existence, of humanity. Chaos surrounds everything, uncertainty looms on every horizon, and death is an inevitability that awaits all at the end. Yet you cannot forget that the very roots of existence are seeped deeply in a brimming essence of joy. Life itself is a joyful existence, and the search for meaning in it is the essence of what life truly is. Nodens disappears, leaving behind the Shard of Memory in your group's care. Once again, it's time to get a little philosophical. If you really think about it, there is a fixed amount of energy in the universe. It changes form constantly, but the amount of it never rises or falls, just changes. Tatsuya claims that life is the thing that brings order to nature. Nature is something that spirals towards chaos, but life is the force that brings chaos back into order. So perhaps that is the meaning of life. Life is created to be the order that balances out the chaos that is nature. But then again, maybe that's just us trying to justify our existence, and ultimately there is no meaning in life. But Maya chooses to think positive and mentions, of course there's meaning in life, and whatever it may be, you can take comfort in the fact that it does exist. The next room holds some sort of horrific monstrosity. It's not something from legend, it's an alien. One who arrived on Earth eons ago and is responsible for the life present here. What? I mean, there's literally an alien spaceship under the city in the main game. Is an alien that created life so hard to believe at this point? Anyways, the alien doesn't appear to speak English and instead seems to communicate in a weird manner of whistles. The gang turn to Maya. What do we do now? Maya walks up to the strange beast and wonders, what could it possibly want? Maybe it's hungry? And she produces a can of crab meat from her bag. What follows is a bit of a goofy scene about your party just being mostly disgusted with Maya for eating canned crab meat. In any case, she decides to toss the entire can into the gaping maw of the monstrosity. It seems to mull over for a while over what Maya put into its mouth before releasing a contented whistle and disappearing, leaving behind the Shard of Wisdom. Well, that was a bit of an odd encounter, so we move on to the next room where we find Dagon, a servant of Cthulhu. He's not much for words, it just keeps repeating the phrase, Cthulhu Fatagan. Zula suggests that this one might not be so easy to parlay with, so your group are forced to deal with force this time around. And after a hectic battle where you bring him down, you manage to gain the Shard of Perception, which the beast was holding on to. And you move on to the next room, no philosophical stuff this time around. This time you find the actual Cthulhu. Huh. I mean, I guess we shouldn't be too surprised by all these Lovecraftian references. I mean, the main bad guy in the game is Nyarlathotep. Anyways, much like Dagon, it's unlikely that Cthulhu is going to be much for talking. After all, what is not dead, which can eternal lie, with strange aeons, even death may die. So your group head into battle with the sea beastie, and after a long duel, you eventually defeat it and retrieve the Shard of Will. Well, afterwards, you do actually have a bit of a conversation this time, and your group ponder how such a thing could exist within the consciousness of humanity. Baofu knows that it's not too surprising. I mean, every day, more and more people are thrown off the deep end into pure madness. Maybe monsters like that are already walking among us, just under a thin human disguise. Tatsuya stares at his feet at that statement and asks, how can we as a people become better? Come on, Tatsuya, you know what the answer is at this point. The answer to everything: think positive. It's become a cliche at this point, but honestly, everyone's still really happy to hear it. With that, you take the shard and move on. Whereupon you come to the final room where you find part of him. Dweller of Darkness, God of 1,000 forms, the faceless god. This is the avatar of the crawling chaos. The avatar laughs at the sight of your party. Don't you realize if you chase 2 rabbits, you'll catch neither? The world is plummeting to its destruction as we speak, yet you're wasting your time chasing after some girl. But whatever. If you really want her back so badly, I can happily oblige. And behind Maya appears a figure, Shiori, clutching a very familiar-looking spear. She sends a thrust in Maya's direction, but this time, Tatsuya is a little quicker on his feet, and he manages to knock Maya out of the way, and the Holy Lance barely misses his face. The group turn to Shiori. Her body looks normal, but her face is shattered, like a porcelain bowl struck by a hammer. Yet, her voice comes from within, and she mentions her brother. It's Tatsuya and Maya's fault that he died 10 years ago. If you hadn't altered the timelines, he never would have gotten caught up in this mess. He wouldn't have had to die for your sins. But it's okay, Tatsuya. You can make up for it. You just need to take his place. Die and give back the brother she misses so much. Maya and Tatsuya wince at her accusation, unable to really deny anything she said. The faceless god laughs at their hesitation. Aren't you glad I gave you your wish? Here she is. I brought her back. I gave her the rest of her personality back. Her complexes, her emotional trauma, her shadow. You've seen it on the other side, haven't you? The shadow is part of every human, and she can't exist without it. So you have to make a choice, Tatsuya, because like I said, you won't catch 2 rabbits at once. Who will you save? Maya? Or Shiori? Tatsuya sinks to his knees at a loss at what to do. The faceless god advances on him, cackling, but Maya jumps in the way. The rest of your group jump in as well, and fight to protect Shiori and Tatsuya. It's a difficult battle as the avatar of the crawling chaos pelts your party with power unlike any you've seen before. But eventually, after a long struggle, you manage to push him back, just a little. The faceless god scoffs at your minor triumph. He looks forward to you facing his true form in his own realm. Until then, he'll be waiting, before vanishing, leaving behind the shard of emotion. Your group put away your weapons and turn to face Tatsuya to find him strangling Shiori. Tatsuya rushes forward to pull Tatsuya off of her, and the shadow of Shiori vanishes, leaving behind the shard of reflection. Fortunately, the shard itself isn't harmed, and with it, you're successful in fully repairing Shiori's shattered psyche. But that doesn't mean that this fight hasn't brought a heavy psychological toll on your party. Everyone stands in silence as the screen fades to black. We cut to a scene in a hospital where Shiori suddenly awakens to find Anna standing at her bedside. It seems like she's been out for quite a while, but thankfully, Tatsuya and some of his friends seem to have brought her here to recover. Shiori immediately asks, what happened to him? Where is Tatsuya? And Anna simply shakes her head. That Tatsuya she knows, is probably never going to be seen again. Shiori bows her head. It really wasn't a dream, after all. She had been there. The darkest part of her mind had blamed Tatsuya for the death of her brother. But she knows it's not his fault. She wishes desperately that she could apologize. Tears begin to stream down her face, and very, very quietly, under her breath, she thanks him for everything he did.